The knock on my apartment door came at 7:43 p.m. on a Tuesday evening in October. I remember the exact time because I'd just paused my favorite cooking show to grab the takeout I'd ordered. Living alone for 17 years had taught me to appreciate these small, predictable moments of peace. But when I opened that door, my carefully constructed world tilted on its axis. Standing in my hallway was a ghost from my past, my mother, Linda, the woman who'd made it crystal clear 17 years ago that I was no longer part of her family. Time had etched new lines around her eyes, and her once vibrant auburn hair was now streaked with gray. But that calculating look in her eyes remained unchanged. Behind her stood a man I didn't recognize at first. My stepfather, Marcus, heavier now, his face red and puffy from what looked like years of hard living. "Hello, Sarah," my mother said, as casually as if we'd seen each other last week instead of nearly 2 decades ago. "We need to talk." The audacity of those 3 words, "we need to talk," after everything that had happened, made my hands shake as I gripped the doorframe. 17 years of silence, 17 years of building myself up from nothing, 17 years of therapy to work through the abandonment, and she stood there like she had the right to demand anything from me. "How did you find me?" My voice came out steadier than I felt. I'd changed my phone number years ago, moved cities twice, and kept my social media locked down specifically to avoid this moment. "That doesn't matter," Marcus interjected, his voice carrying that same dismissive tone I remembered from my teenage years. "What matters is family, and family helps each other. Family." The word tasted bitter in my mouth. Family was supposed to protect you, not throw you out like yesterday's garbage when something better came along. But I stepped aside, letting them into my apartment, not out of obligation, but out of morbid curiosity. What could possibly bring them to my door after all this time? They sat on my expensive leather couch, the one I'd saved 6 months to buy, looking distinctly out of place in my carefully curated living room. Every piece of furniture, every piece of art on the walls, every book on my shelves represented a victory, a step away from the scared, homeless 16-year-old I'd once been. Now, at 33, I was a senior marketing manager at a Fortune 500 company. I'd earned my bachelor's degree through night school while working 3 jobs, then my MBA through sheer determination and student loans I'd just finished paying off last year. "You've done well for yourself," Linda observed, her eyes scanning my apartment with an appraising look that made my skin crawl. "Very well, from what we've heard." "Heard from whom?" I asked, settling into the armchair across from them, maintaining distance both physical and emotional. "People talk, Sarah. Your success hasn't gone unnoticed in our old neighborhood. Mrs. Patterson's daughter works at your company. She mentioned seeing you in some corporate newsletter, winning some big award, the Innovation Excellence Award. I'd led a campaign that increased our client retention by 34% and brought in $12 million in new revenue. It was the achievement that had finally secured my promotion to senior management, complete with a 6-figure salary and stock options. But I wasn't about to share that with them. "What do you want?" I cut straight to the point. There was no use pretending this was a social visit. No point in fake pleasantries with people who'd shown me exactly where I stood in their priorities half a lifetime ago. Linda shifted uncomfortably, glancing at Marcus before speaking. "It's about the twins, Jason and Jessica. Your siblings." "My siblings, the replacements." The 2 perfect babies who'd arrived when Linda was 41, after years of Marcus pressuring her for children of his own. The pregnancy had been high risk, the medical bills astronomical, but they'd been so happy. So happy that they'd decided their limited resources, emotional, financial, and physical, were better spent on their new family unit. A unit that didn't include the difficult teenager from Linda's previous relationship. "They're 17 now," Linda continued, pulling out her phone to show me photos I didn't want to see. 2 blonde teenagers smiled back from the screen, wearing matching Letterman jackets, both honors students. Jason's captain of the debate team, and Jessica's already been scouted by 3 universities for her volleyball skills. The pride in Linda's voice as she described the twins' accomplishments was a knife twisting in old wounds. This was the enthusiasm, the parental joy I'd craved so desperately as a teenager. When I'd made the honor roll despite working part-time to buy my own school supplies, she'd barely looked up from fawning over the twins' baby photos. When I'd won the state essay contest, she'd been too busy with their teething to attend the ceremony. "They've both been accepted to prestigious universities," Marcus added, leaning forward with an intensity that immediately put me on guard. "Jason got into Princeton for political science, and Jessica's going to Duke for biomedical engineering. Full rides academically, but there it was, the but that had brought them to my door. But the cost of living, books, meal plans, all the additional expenses, it's overwhelming." Linda picked up where Marcus left off, their tag team approach clearly rehearsed. "We've done the math. Between both of them, we're looking at about $40,000 per year in additional costs. Over 4 years, that's $160,000, I finished, my voice flat. "And you're here because?" The silence stretched between us, heavy with expectation and 17 years of resentment. Linda's face cycled through several expressions: embarrassment, frustration, and finally, settling on righteous indignation. "Because you're their sister," she said, as if this explained everything. Because family helps family. Because you've been blessed with success, and this is your chance to give back. Give back. As if I owed them anything. As if I hadn't spent my first winter after being kicked out sleeping in a 24-hour laundromat, doing homework under fluorescent lights while washing the same 3 outfits over and over. As if I hadn't survived on expired food from the dumpster behind the grocery store where I eventually got a job, lying about my age because no one wants to hire a 16-year-old who can't list a permanent address. You want me to pay for their college expenses, I stated. Not asked. Because the audacity of it needed to be said out loud. Needed to hang in the air between us like the accusation it was. We're not asking for all of it, Marcus said quickly, pulling out a folder he'd been clutching. We've broken it down. If you could cover half 80,000 over 4 years, that's just 20,000 per year. For someone in your position, that's manageable. He slid the folder across my coffee table like he was presenting a business proposal. Inside were spreadsheets, college brochures, and even a payment plan they'd drawn up, showing how I could transfer money monthly to make it easier on my budget. They'd done their research on my salary too. The numbers they quoted were frighteningly accurate to what someone in my position would make. The violation of my privacy, the presumption, the sheer entitlement of it all made my stomach turn. You kicked me out, I said quietly, my hands folded in my lap to hide their trembling. When I was 16 years old, you put my belongings in trash bags and told me I was no longer welcome in the only home I'd ever known. Do you remember what you said to me that day? Linda's face flushed, but she lifted her chin defiantly. That was different. We were in a difficult position. The twins were premature, the medical bills were crushing us. Marcus had just lost his job, and you were. Challenging. Challenging. Is that what they called a teenager struggling with depression and anxiety after years of emotional neglect? Is that what they called a girl who just wanted to be loved and included in her own family? You said, I continued, my voice gaining strength, that you needed to focus on your real family. That at 16, I was old enough to take care of myself. That the twins deserved parents who weren't distracted by a teenager's problems. You said you were doing me a favor, teaching me independence. And look how well it worked out, Linda exclaimed, gesturing around my apartment. You're successful, independent, strong. Would you have achieved all this if you'd stayed? The gaslighting was so breathtaking that I actually laughed, a harsh, bitter sound that made them both flinch. I achieved this despite you, not because of you. I graduated high school while homeless. Did you know that? I slept in my car, when I finally saved enough to buy one, and showered at the gym where I work the 4 a.m. shift cleaning equipment. I studied for my SATs by streetlight because I couldn't afford electricity in the studio apartment I finally rented at 18. We didn't know Marcus started, but I cut him off. You didn't care. You never once reached out. Not when I turned 18, not when I graduated college, not when Mrs. Patterson's daughter Shirley told you about my promotions. 17 years of silence, and now you show up asking for $80,000? The tension in the room was suffocating. Linda's face had gone from flushed to pale, her hands clutching her purse like a lifeline. Marcus's jaw was clenched, that vein in his temple throbbing the way it used to before one of his famous outbursts. But I wasn't 16 anymore, and this was my home, my territory. Those children are innocent in all this, Linda said, switching tactics to emotional manipulation. Whatever happened between us, Jason and Jessica don't deserve to suffer. They've worked so hard, Sarah. Don't punish them for our mistakes. Our mistakes. At least she was acknowledging it was a mistake, though the plural was generous. Marcus had been the driving force, but Linda had chosen him and her new babies over her first daughter. Still, the manipulation was transparent, using the twins as emotional leverage, knowing that despite everything, I might have a soft spot for 2 kids who were, biologically at least, my half-siblings. Have you told them about me? I asked, genuinely curious. Do they even know they have an older sister, or did you erase me from the family history entirely? The guilty look that passed between Linda and Marcus was answer enough. Of course they hadn't. How would they explain it? Oh, by the way, we threw out your older sister when you were babies because we couldn't afford 3 kids, and you 2 were more important. Not exactly a bedtime story. They know. Some things, Linda said vaguely. We told them they had a sister who left home young to pursue her career. Left home, I repeated. That's an interesting way to phrase it. Did you mention the trash bags? The October rain I stood in while you changed the locks? The way Marcus threatened to call the police if I didn't leave immediately? You're being dramatic, Marcus snapped, his patience finally fraying. We did what we had to do. We had 2 premature infants in the NICU, bills piling up, and you were acting out, staying out late, your grades slipping. My grades were slipping because I was working 30 hours a week to pay for my own food and clothes. I shot back, my carefully maintained composure finally cracking. You'd already made it clear that every dollar spent on me was a dollar taken from the twins. I was trying to be less of a burden, but nothing I did was ever enough. And yet, here you are, successful beyond anything you could have achieved in our household, Linda said, trying once more to spin the narrative. Sarah, please. We're not asking for charity. We're asking for an investment in your siblings' futures. They could be doctors, lawyers, leaders. With your help, stop. The word came out with such force that both of them actually jumped. I stood up, needing to move, needing to put distance between us. I walked to my window, looking out at the city lights below, gathering my thoughts and my strength. Do you know what the hardest part was? I asked, not turning around. It wasn't the hunger or the cold or the fear. It was the loneliness. It was spending my 17th birthday completely alone, buying myself a cupcake from the day-old section at the bakery where I worked. It was watching other kids get picked up by their parents after school events while I walked home in the dark. It was having no one to call when I was scared or sick or just needed to hear that everything would be okay. I turned back to face them, and for the first time in 17 years, I let them see the pain they'd caused. Not the anger, not the resentment, but the raw, deep hurt of a child abandoned by the one person who was supposed to love her unconditionally. I built this life with my own hands, my own sweat, my own tears. Every degree, every promotion, every single achievement was earned without a support system, without a safety net, without anyone to catch me if I fell. And I did fall, many times. But I got back up, alone, every single time. Sarah Linda started, tears forming in her eyes, but I wasn't done. And now you want me to hand over $80,000 to fund the education of two strangers who don't even know I exist? Two kids who got everything I begged for. Your attention, your pride, your presence at their school events, your financial support, your love. You want me to subsidize the childhood I never got to have? The tears were flowing freely down Linda's face now, but were they tears of regret or just frustration that her plan wasn't working? After 17 years, I couldn't read her anymore, if I ever really could. They're not strangers, she whispered. They're your brother and sister. No, I said firmly. They're your children. I'm not their sister. You made that choice 17 years ago when you decided our family didn't include me. You don't get to retroactively add me back in when it's convenient, when you need something. Marcus stood up abruptly, his face red with anger. This is exactly the selfishness we were talking about. You have more than enough money. What's $80,000 to you? You probably spend that on your car and fancy clothes. His assumption about my spending habits was so far off the mark it was almost laughable. My car was a reliable Honda, paid off 2 years ago. My work clothes were carefully chosen investment pieces, bought on sale and meticulously maintained. I still had anxiety attacks in grocery stores sometimes, my hand hesitating over name-brand items, the ghost of teenage hunger making me choose the cheaper option even though I could afford better now. They had no idea about the therapy bills, about the years it took to stop hoarding food, about the panic that still seized me when my bank balance dropped below a certain threshold, my emergency fund, my never-again homeless fund. What's $80,000 to me? I repeated, my voice dangerously quiet. It's security. It's knowing I'll never be that scared 16-year-old again. It's my future children's college funds. Children who will never ever wonder if they're wanted or loved or worth investing in. It's my retirement, my safety net, my hard-earned peace of mind. Your future children? Linda latched onto that, hope flickering in her eyes. Then you understand. You understand wanting to provide for your kids, wanting to give them opportunities. I understand that when I have children, they'll be my responsibility. I cut her off. Just like Jason and Jessica are yours, you had 17 years to plan for this. 17 years to save, to prepare. What did you do with that time? The question hung in the air, and the guilty looks that passed between them told me everything. They'd assumed the twins' academic abilities would earn them full scholarships. They'd assumed everything would work out, and when it didn't, they'd assumed they could come to me, their discarded daughter, and I'd bail them out. We've had setbacks, Marcus said defensively. The economy, medical bills, my business ventures that didn't pan out. Business ventures, I remembered those. The get-rich-quick schemes, the MLMs, the failed restaurant he'd insisted would make them millionaires. He'd always been chasing the big score instead of building steadily, the way I'd had to. I need you both to leave, I said, suddenly exhausted. The emotional labor of this conversation was draining me in ways I hadn't expected. The answer is no. It will always be no. I wish Jason and Jessica the best. Truly I do. They're innocent in all this. But they're not my responsibility, and neither are you. Linda stood up slowly, her face a mask of disbelief. You're really going to do this? You're really going to let them suffer because of your grudge against us? I'm not letting them suffer, I replied, walking to my door and opening it, a clear signal that this conversation was over. You are. You're the parents. You made the choice to have them. You made the choice to throw me out. You don't get to make your failures my responsibility. But Linda wasn't done. She walked toward me, but instead of leaving, she grabbed my arm, her nails digging in. You owe us, she hissed, all pretense of motherly concern gone. We gave you life. We raised you for 16 years. That has to count for something. I looked down at her hand on my arm, then back at her face, and for a moment, I saw the woman who'd chosen her new family over me all those years ago. The woman who'd stood by while Marcus loaded my things into garbage bags. The woman who'd changed the locks while I was at school, ensuring I couldn't even come back for the things I'd forgotten. You gave me life, I agreed, removing her hand from my arm. And then you took away everything that made it worth living. We're even. Marcus was beside her now, both of them in my doorway, and I could see our neighbors starting to peek out of their apartments. The last thing I needed was a scene, but they weren't moving. This isn't over, Marcus said, his voice low and threatening. We know where you work. We know where you live. Family helps family, Sarah, one way or another. The threat was clear, and something inside me snapped, not into anger, but into a cold, clear determination. I pulled out my phone, making sure they could see me opening the recording app. Are you threatening me? I asked clearly. Because I'm recording this interaction now, and I should inform you that attempted extortion is a crime. So is harassment. I've asked you to leave my property. If you don't leave immediately, I'll call the police. Linda's face went white. You'd call the police on your own mother? You stopped being my mother the day you put my belongings in trash bags, I replied. You're trespassing now. Leave, or I make the call. They left, but not without Marcus muttering something about ungrateful bitch under his breath and Linda sobbing dramatically in the hallway, loud enough for all the neighbors to hear. I closed the door, locked it, and slid down to the floor, my whole body shaking. The next 3 weeks were hell. It started with the phone calls. Dozens of them, from numbers I didn't recognize. Linda had apparently given my number to every relative I hadn't spoken to in 17 years, all of them with opinions about my selfishness and my duty to family. I blocked them all, but they kept coming from new numbers. Then came the social media assault. Despite my privacy settings, they found ways to message me through mutual connections, old high school acquaintances who suddenly wanted to reconnect only to lecture me about forgiveness and family values. Marcus even created fake profiles to send me increasingly aggressive messages, ranging from guilt trips to outright threats. The escalation came when they showed up at my workplace. Security called me down to the lobby, where Linda was making a scene, crying and telling everyone who would listen that her heartless daughter was letting her siblings starve while living in luxury. My boss, thankfully, was understanding when I explained the situation, but the humiliation burned hot in my chest. I filed for a restraining order that week, documenting everything: the harassment, the threats, the workplace incident. My lawyer, a woman who'd also escaped a toxic family situation, was thorough and ruthless in her approach. But before the order could be served, things came to a head. I was walking to my car after work when they ambushed me in the parking garage. Marcus grabbed my laptop bag while Linda tried to go through my purse, looking for my wallet, screaming about taking what was owed to them. The security cameras captured everything. Me trying to get away, Marcus pushing me against my car, Linda actually striking me across the face when I wouldn't give her my bank information. What they didn't count on was that my company's parking garage had excellent security and quick response times. Guards were there within minutes, and this time, I didn't hesitate to press charges. Watching them get arrested was surreal. Linda sobbing about her babies needing college money, Marcus shouting about ungrateful children and family obligations. The restraining order was approved immediately after that incident. They were banned from coming within 500 feet of me, my home, or my workplace. The assault charges would likely result in probation for Linda and possible jail time for Marcus, given his prior record that I hadn't even known about. It's been 6 months since that night in the parking garage. The legal proceedings are ongoing, but my lawyer says it's a clear-cut case. The twins, Jason and Jessica, reached out to me through Facebook after everything became public. They were horrified by what our parents had done, apologizing for a situation they hadn't even known existed. Apparently, Linda and Marcus had told them I was dead. We've been exchanging emails, getting to know each other slowly. They're nothing like our parents. They're kind, thoughtful, and remarkably well-adjusted, despite being raised by Linda and Marcus. They both got jobs to help with their college expenses and are looking into student loans and additional scholarships. I've been quietly providing them with information about financial aid resources and essay help, though I haven't told them that. Maybe someday, when the wounds aren't so fresh and the legal matters are settled, I might help them directly. But it will be my choice, on my terms, because they're good kids who didn't ask for any of this, not because Linda and Marcus demanded it. The strangest part of all this is the peace I found in the aftermath. For 17 years, I'd wondered if I was the problem, if I really had been too difficult, too much trouble, not worth keeping. But their return, their demands, their escalation to violence when denied, it all confirmed what my therapist had been telling me for years. It was never about me. It was about them, their limitations, their choices, their failures. I still have the scars, both physical and emotional. I still sometimes wake up in a panic, 17 years old again and checking to make sure I have a roof over my head. But I also have something they never gave me and never could: self-respect, independence, and the knowledge that every good thing in my life is something I earned myself. The family I've built, my chosen family of friends, mentors, and colleagues who've supported me through this, they're worth more than blood could ever be. They showed up during the court hearings, They checked on me during the harassment, and they celebrated with me when the restraining order was granted. Linda and Marcus wanted me to pay for their children's future, but what they actually gave me was closure. They showed me that cutting them out wasn't my loss, it was my liberation. They validated every boundary I'd built, every dollar I'd saved, every moment I'd invested in becoming someone they could never break again. Sometimes when I'm sitting in my apartment, my sanctuary, my achievement, my proof of survival, I think about that 16-year-old girl standing in the rain with garbage bags full of her belongings. I wish I could tell her that it gets better, that she's stronger than she knows, that one day, the people who threw her away would come crawling back, and she'd have the power to say no. That she'd win, not through revenge, but through the simple act of surviving, thriving, and refusing to let their poison back into the life she built from nothing but determination and hope.